demonstrate that John Gotti is the head, the boss of the Gambino family.
Another thing that I saw on YouTube looking around, I want to get into these prosecutors and stuff. Another thing that I saw was we spoke about John Gleason and some of these talks that he does with the Mob Museum. And I watched some of that. I haven't watched the whole thing, but I watched some of it. And he made a few. Well, he made a few interesting points. He spoke about the case against John, and they had the tapes, and how and this was his words, that he felt it was a shallow case, even though he felt Bruce Cutler would have a hard time to cross-examine the tapes, but he felt it was a shallow case. He said only once Sammy the Bull cooperated was it, he called it a prosecutor's dream case because of Gravano. And then I just thought that was an interesting thing for him to say.
Jesse, on another one of his interviews, he says the case was a slam dunk, even without Gravano. See, Gleason can't have it both ways. The problem.
I've heard him say that too. I've heard him say that.
Gleason talks both ends of his mouth, and that's what he did during the trial. They were afraid of Bruce Cutler. They didn't want Bruce Cutler in that courtroom. They didn't want Bruce Cutler to cross-examine Gravano once Gravano flipped. But the most interesting thing, and for the intelligent people that are listening to this, how long was Gravano going to those attorney-client meetings with John, Frankie Lowe, Gravano, Tommy Gambino in the MCC? How long was he participating in those meetings? We don't know. Those 302s never existed. Mm-hmm. So Gravano, more than likely, knowing how vicious and how treacherous Gleason, this was more than just a case for Gleason. This was a need. This was a desire. This was a craving, because he wanted to make it right for Diane Giacalone on the first case, where Diane Giacalone basically had Willie Boy Johnson murdered. She outed Willie Boy Johnson. Whether he was a good guy or a bad guy, I'm not here to defend him. Yes, he was a rat for many years, and he cooperated, and so on and so forth. That being said, the government murdered Willie Boy Johnson. Okay? And there were other cooperators that they murdered. They murdered Whitey Bulger. They will stop at nothing. Okay, but to get back to New York and to get back to John Gleason. So Gleason was on the first case with Diane Giacalone. His adopted mother, his sister, I don't know what she was to him, but he had this fetish for her, this need to protect her, to help her. And John and Bruce destroyed her on that case. They were passing out her underwear. They were talking. I mean, they destroyed Giacalone. And so there was a lot of bad feelings. So Gleason, then they lose that case, and Gleason is now the prosecutor on the next Gotti case. And like I said, Gleason had this obsession to go after John, to break laws, to break rules on every level, and that he did do. And he had the perfect judge. He had Judge Glasser, who was Judge Glasser, the judge and prosecutor. Judge Glasser was the lead prosecutor in the case. And he assisted the government from start to finish by disqualifying the lawyers and giving them 3 to 4 weeks to get new counsel. So he did all that. But to get back to the beginning, we don't know, and I don't believe that Junior knows or anybody knows, how long was Gravano cooperating. All those attorney-client meetings in the MCC, was he reporting back to the government, to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and to the FBI? We don't know that. Gleason knows that. But, I mean, Gleason's cousin, if I'm not mistaken, you might know better, Jesse, Gleason's cousin was related to John Gotti.
Yeah, I've got that wrote down, and he did mention that in this interview that I saw, that John Gleason's sister was married to John Gotti's first cousin. And he discussed that a little bit, which obviously to me seems like a conflict of interest. And I know you've spoke about this before.
No, of course.
He claimed there was a process in place that if they were like 4 steps removed, then he couldn't be involved in the case. But with John, it was 5 steps.
No, 10 steps.
Or what? Well, I don't know how many steps, but it just seems to me like that would have been a conflict of interest. And he says in the interview that he chose to keep that quiet because he knew that John would use that against him.
Well, why did he keep it quiet? Didn't he have an obligation? Didn't he have a responsibility? Andrew Maloney knew about it. Laura Ward knew about it. Jamie Orenstein knew about it. Judge Glasser knew about it because that was his rabbi. Rabbi Judge Glasser. He loved Gleason. That was his boy.
Well, is that something that John knew at the time, or only is this something that you guys found out later?
We found that after. Believe me, if we would have known that, that would have been all over.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what he feared. He said in the interview, he feared that's why he chose to keep it quiet, because it would have been used against him.
100%. 100%. He had a fear of that, getting outed about the relationship, and then he had a fear of Bruce Cutler being in that courtroom. He wasn't afraid of Jerry Shargell because no one cross-examined a witness or a rat as good as Bruce Cutler. And that's what John loved about him. Like I said, he wasn't a lawman and he wasn't a Harvard graduate. But if you were going to get cross-examined, we used to call it Brucifying somebody. If Bruce was going to Brucify you, he would have destroyed you. And Gleason was afraid of that. But see, Gleason had this whole thing planned. He knew if he could convict John, that his adopted father, Rabbi Glasser, would have definitely used his contacts to get him a judgeship, and he became a federal judge, stayed on the bench 12 or 15 years, resigned the federal judgeship, then went to work in one of those fancy white shoe law firms and making millions of dollars a year. But how do you, and then he tells everybody, I was a good judge. I was lenient. I never put anybody in jail for a lot of time.
Yeah, I wrote that down in that interview. He goes on to talk about, becoming a judge and being a compassionate judge. That's what he said, which I thought was,
There was not, he didn't have an ounce of compassion in his body. He had no class. He had no dignity. He was in the same league. He was in the same category of a Gravano, but in a different way.
He went on in that interview to praise Gravano.
He loved Gravano. Gravano. And like I said, when you're in custody and you're in the MCC, and remember, those COs all loved John, and many of those COs were on the Gambino payroll. Gravano didn't pick up the phone and say, hey, could you connect me with the FBI? Can you connect me with John Gleason and Bruce Mal? That was planned. His wife was the conduit, which we found out afterwards. That part we did know. But how far was Debbie Gravano seeing Bruce Mal and George Gabriel, the 2 lead agents on the from the FBI on the Gambino squad, while Gravano was still attending the attorney-client meetings? Yeah. So you have Gleason failure to disclose his relationship with the Gotti family, the Gambino family, a clear violation. You have Judge Glasser protecting him. Okay, you have Cutler and Shargell getting disqualified. John and Frankie Lowe being allowed 3 weeks to get new counsel on a case like that. You have Gleason meeting with Gravano, and again, now what I believe, every attorney-client visit, whatever took place, John Gleason knew about, Bruce Mal knew about, and George Gabriel knew about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know why, but I never thought of that until you mentioned that he was sitting in on these attorney-client privileges, these meetings.
You had the enemy sitting in. His wife was meeting with the government. And then Sammy was going to these attorney-client privileged communication meetings.
Mm-hmm.
Not that anything was being discussed so important, because John used to say it's a waste of time. But it's not what you do. It's improper and it's unethical.
Yeah, it does give you an edge. I mean,
of course, it gives you an edge. They talk. Oh, he fixed the jury. Oh, he threatened this guy. Oh, he did this. Nothing's worse than what they did.
Yeah,
nothing's worse than what they did.
And all this is not even really about John's innocence or guilt, but there has to be some type of accountability and some type of rules that these prosecutors have to go by. And a lot of that got thrown out the window, it seems.
Well, because it was to get John Gotti. And then you had this guy, Jim Fox, who was head of the New York office of the FBI, another egomaniac. See, back in those days, you had that whole Bush administration, Thornburg, all those guys, they just wanted to convict John, break the rules, lie, cheat, do whatever you got to do. Just convict this guy. Because I believe if Gleason was held accountable and realized he couldn't get away with lying and cheating and committing all these different fraudulent acts, he would have never done it. He would have never done it. But he knew he had the blessing of the United States Attorney, and I believe he knew he had the blessing of the White House to proceed in this fashion. But it goes to show you the levels that people have within power to kill you, to keep you alive, and to destroy you. They can't, once they indict you, they can't say, oh, you're a good guy, we're not going to indict you. They destroy you. They win no matter what. They win no matter what.